Right. Hello. Yes, hi. Oh, we've got more people than I initially thought. We are going to, for all of you guys, you will have done some biology at the weekend on the circulatory system and the heart and stuff. I will answer some questions initially, after which I'm going to do a little summary of what I think is really important for you to know on this topic, which is basically the whole procedure that your blood goes through from the moment you breathe in to the moment you breathe out. I'm going to sort of recap all of that um, in the first part of this and then move on to the GCSE kids afterwards. I've received one question so far. If anybody has any more, please tell me so I can get through those preferably first rather than throughout the session. Just a reminder for you guys at least, just say booklet one, two, or three, which you have on the front of it. Technically, it should be roughly year seven's booklet one, year eight's booklet two, year nine's booklet three, roughly. It's not always quite like that. And four, booklet one. Okay. Right. I shall begin by answering the questions in order that I've received. So, booklet three, question one has been asked first. I'll also open up that chat in case anybody wants to say anything there. But as a reminder, in case you're here for the first time, there is a Q&A section on Zoom on which you can ask what you like, say what you like. So, booklet three, question one has been asked. This is booklet three, question one, um, in which it says that the graph shows the rate of blood flow through different organs at rest and during exercise. So the exercise one's the darker bar, the at rest is the lighter bar. It tells you the blood rate of blood flow. Rate of blood flow. Just look out for these words here, okay? Because they do matter. Rate means how quickly the blood flows through these organs. It's not just how much it flows, it's how quickly it flows. Um, Determine the total volume of blood that flows through the brain in 1 hour. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at the brain. Now, these two bars are the same, which is helpful. Um, so, so what we're saying here is that regardless of whether you're exercising or resting, the speed of the blood through the brain is exactly the same. So we just use the number that it goes up to. Just be careful with reading graphs. I think people sometimes don't do this very well. Figuring out what number that actually is. Um, well, what I would do, just the way I do this, is I go, well, that's 2,000. So half of that will be 1,000. So that's there. This is going up in 5 steps all the way to 1,000, 5 little squares, which means that each of those squares must be worth 200. It's 200, 400, 600, 800, and then 1,000. So three of these little squares means that this must be 600. Okay, so what we're learning is that in 1 minute, because that's what this tells you, this is why I have to read the question very carefully. In 1 minute, 600 centimeters cubed of blood flows through the brain. That's how much flows through in 1 minute. Okay. Determine the total volume of blood that flows through the brain in 1 hour. Now, an hour is 60 minutes. So, surely, if in 1 minute we get this much blood through the brain, if we times that by 60, we will find out how much flows through the brain in 1 hour. It is about reading the question very carefully so that you notice these things like minutes and hours and so on. So in 1 hour, it should be 600 times 60, which is 36,000, which is the answer to that question. Um, there's more. Right. Look at the blood flow through the skeletal muscle. Calculate how many times the blood flow increases by during exercise compared to at rest. So let's look at skeletal muscle, which is this section here. All right. Let's see what this bar goes up to. That bar goes up to 1,200. And let's see what the other bar, because the other it's comparing at rest, which is the first bar, to exercise, which is the second bar. The second bar goes up to, oh God, 11,600, looks like to me. That's 11,200, 400, 600, 11,600. Okay. So quite a difficult one. The question is how many times it increases by during exercise compared to at rest. So at rest, we just said it was 1,200, and exercise, it was 11,600. 1,200, 11,600. They're the two numbers. But the question is by how many times it's bigger. If I said to you that I've got the number 2 and I've got the number 10, and I said, how many times bigger is the number 10 than the number 2? You know the answer is 5. But the calculation that you would do is 10 divided by 2. That tells you how much bigger or how many times bigger a bigger number is than a smaller number. So to do the same thing here, you would need to do 11,600 divided by 1,200. And you will get an answer on your calculator. You'll have to do it of about 9.6 or 9.7. And that is the answer to this question. And then explain. Important word when you're looking at exam questions. Explain. That tells you why. Why the blood flow to the skeletal muscles increases during exercise. Well, what do we need more of during exercise? We need more energy. That's what we need because we are, doing more work. So my first point here is that our muscles need more energy. But how do we get energy? Energy comes from that process called respiration. Respiration requires two main things, oxygen and glucose, to get to your muscles. And if how does oxygen and glucose get to your muscles? It goes through the blood. So when you're exercising, what happens is your blood flows faster so that we can get more oxygen to your cells. So if we need more energy, we need more oxygen. Why do we need more oxygen? So that we can increase or do more respiration. So these words should always link together in your mind. Energy, respiration, oxygen, more respiration, more energy. This is how it works. And that answers the first question. I think I've got quite a lot of questions from booklet 1, so I will do that now. Some of these will overlap, by the way, because they do a little bit, so you may find your question is being answered regardless. 1 and 2 from this one. Let's have a look at what's 1 and 2. Right. Well, 1A I probably shouldn't need to do because when it says name one substance transported by the blood, name anything carried by your blood. You can say oxygen, you can say water, you can say glucose, you can say carbon dioxide. I think any of those are sensible answers. Oxygen is probably the one I'm going to write down. This one's a little bit harder. The main type of tissue in the heart wall, the heart is actually just one really big muscle. And that's the type of tissue in the heart wall. It is all just a big muscle. And then this is the kind of thing that I will explain a little bit later on. In fact, I'm going to do a tiny bit of it now. See if I'm just keeping an eye on everybody's questions. SC2, I don't know what that means. 5C part 2. Okay, in question in booklet 2. Okay, I'll get to there. So just a little, I'm going to do this probably near the end as well, depending on time, but this is a quick summary of this kind of thing, right? What the L stands for is lungs, the H stands for heart, and the B stands for the whole body, basically. So all of your cells in your body. When you breathe in oxygen, it goes into your lungs. It then is moved, the blood then carrying that oxygen goes to your heart. The heart then pumps it all over the body. So all that oxygen that you breathed in here gets delivered to all of your cells over here. But when your cells use that oxygen for something called respiration, they release loads of carbon dioxide that we want to get rid of. So what happens at this point is all of the carbon dioxide that's being made here as well gets put into the blood, and then that blood goes back to the heart, to the other side of the heart, which is why this is such a good simplified diagram. And then that side of the heart pumps it back to the lungs, at which point we breathe out the carbon dioxide. Okay? It is very important, this little simplified diagram of what is happening here is the least that you need to know about this topic. There is obviously more. There's a few names now. So when the blood is coming from the lungs to the heart, it goes through something called a pulmonary vein. And then when the blood is pumped from the heart all around the body, it's pumped through something called the aorta. When that blood comes back to the heart carrying carbon dioxide, it comes into the heart through something called a vena cava. And then when it's pumped out of the heart to the lungs, it goes through something called the pulmonary artery. Difficult to remember all these things, but gradually you will. And then, if you know all that, this question becomes easy. Which blood vessel, A, B, or C, takes blood to the lungs? So the bit that's taking blood to the lungs is there. Okay. Which on this diagram is there. So the way it works is the blood comes in this way. That's the pulmonary vein. It's then pumped out all around the body. Then it comes back here and then goes back out there, back to the lungs. Okay, so that's the lungs there, the rest of the body over here. And so what's taking blood to the lungs, has got to be B. And then name parts D and E shown in the diagram. These are just remembering that the heart is basically four sections. The top sections are called atriums, left and right, and the bottom are called ventricles, left and right. And that's actually all this question wants. It wants you to name that as being an atrium. If you want to be really precise about it, it's technically the left atrium, and E is the left ventricle. But you technically didn't need the sides for this question. And then are we still on question one? We are. Which type of blood vessel is F? Um, F is, it's got to be a vein, hasn't it? Let me just check. It is a vein. How do we know? Well, first of all, this referenced, remember there's three types of blood vessel. There's arteries, veins, and capillaries. These are quite hard questions, so don't worry too much. Capillaries are really small, and so when it says one cell, it's trying to show that they're really thin and small. So that's your capillaries. That leaves you with either arteries or veins. And what you have to remember is that arteries have got really thick walls and a really small gap here in the center. So really thick walls and a really small, what we call lumen. So that's an artery, which means that this is the vein. Veins have a much bigger space there in the middle. So that's why that is a vein. And then the answer to answer this question quickly. I'll come back to it later probably. But the it's an artery which a stent is placed. Very specifically, it's called a coronary artery. You might not have covered this in the lesson because it kind of comes into disease a little bit more. Question three, booklet three, I'll come back to. How does a stent help to prevent a heart attack? I will probably just explain this towards the end. But what a stent does is it keeps the artery open. Once I've got through the questions that have been asked so far, I'm going to talk about this. Keeps the artery open so blood can flow. I'm going to show you a little video on this later. Okay, blood can flow to the heart. Right, that covers off that. And then there was question two on this as well. Let's do this quite fast. Which type of blood vessel carries blood out of the heart? Remember, if there's one thing you want to remember about arteries, veins, and capillaries, it makes it really easy. An artery beginning with the letter A can help you remember it carries blood away from the heart or out of the heart, which immediately makes that the answer to the question. Whereas veins have the letters IN for in. What do you think they do? They carry blood in or towards the heart. And then capillaries are the really thin ones that allow things to go in and out of the blood. So that is the answer to that subsequent question. And then oxygen enters the blood through the walls of the, it's got to be alveoli, doesn't it, for this one? Yeah, so when we breathe in into our lungs, we have these air sacs called alveoli, which um, put the oxygen into the blood. And then the part of the blood that is carrying most of the oxygen is the red blood cells. And a red blood cell is unique to because compared to all of your other cells in your body, it is the only one, as far as I'm aware, that does not have a nucleus. It gives it more space to carry oxygen. Right, move on. Question four. Um, right. All I'm going to say about question four, especially the first part, which people always seem to get scared of these kind of things. Compare the breathing rates when doing the three different activities. Right. What you need to do first is look at this graph and look at the numbers first. What number is this? That is 12. What number is this? That is 24. What number is this? That is 60. Okay. And then all you need to do is say what you see, but preferably with using some sort of multiples. Like, for example, when you're walking, your breathing rate is twice as big as it is when you are at rest, right? 24 is double 12. When you're jogging, your breathing rate is 5 times more than it is when you are at rest, because 12 times 5 is 60. You could also then work out a multiplier that takes you from walking to jogging, and that will essentially answer that question. It's just about putting in some of the numbers. Um, Okay, so that covers that. Explain why breathing rate changes when doing different activities. Again, I'm not going to write this down, but you can, of course, watch this afterwards. Why does breathing rate change when you do different activities? Well, when you run around, why do you breathe more heavily? Well, what are you trying to do when you're breathing more heavily? You're trying to get more oxygen into your body. I will write something down. Right. You breathe more heavily when you're exercising, for example, or walking or jogging. Sorry, jogging or running. When you're trying to get more oxygen into your body. Why are you trying to get more oxygen into your body? So that you can do more aerobic respiration, because it is one of the requirements of respiration that we have oxygen. Well, aerobic respiration. Um, and why do we do respiration? It is to release energy. This trio of points is very common in a lot of questions, okay? And it can work the opposite way. So less oxygen means less respiration, so less energy released. Like I could have asked you a question right now, which is why does smoking or damaging your lungs make it harder to exercise? Well, because you'll get less oxygen into your body, do less respiration, and release less energy, make it harder to exercise. It's a very sort of typical. Right, just to be clear at this point, I have received one question, year nine, question 2E. That is the last question I'm going to answer. Okay, I'm going to make this rule now that up until about 7:30, I'll take questions because I don't want you to be asking me questions whilst you are doing the homework. So, question one and two. No, question four. Still on question four. Um, The heart is a double pump. What does this mean? It means that one side of the heart is pumping blood around the body, whereas the other side of the heart is pumping blood to the lungs. That's why it's a double pump, is because there's different directions through which it is. Um, Sorry, it's different. There's two pumps basically. One is pumping it around the body, one is pumping it to the lungs. So that's why it's called a double pump. Um, and essentially, that's a very similar answer to the next question. The wall of the left ventricle is thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. So essentially, what we're saying is that this side of the heart is much thicker than this side of the heart. Okay, that wasn't a very good picture. Okay, you see the difference there, right? And it's because this side of the heart has to pump blood much further. It has to go all around the body, so it needs to be stronger. Whereas the other side of the heart is only pumping the blood quite a short distance. Your lungs are quite close to your heart, but they're not like, far away. So it doesn't need to pump the blood as far. So that's why one side of the heart is thicker and stronger than the other side, because it has to pump the blood much further. Um, Yeah, I know I'm doing a different question at the moment, just to be clear. Um, and people are encouraged to exercise after recovering from a heart attack. Why? Probably because it makes the heart stronger. It makes your heart muscle a bit stronger. If you had a heart attack, your heart muscle might be quite weak. You doing a bit of exercise strengthens your muscle. It's the same with any other thinner or thicker than a vein. The artery walls are thicker than the walls of a vein. Okay, right. Let me keep going. Uh, 4, 5C, booklet 2, 5C part 2. Look at that. Aha. Right. I'll tell you the answer again. I will. It's weird this because the picture doesn't appear, but you don't need the picture. You technically need to know what a stent is, and you might not know what a stent is, which is fine. The surgeon puts the stent into an artery in the leg. He moves the stent through the artery. Two possible risks of this operation. Well, firstly, in answer to that question, you don't even need to know anything about this. You should know the risk of any operation is that you can get an infection. Literally any. The whole point of an operation is that your body is being opened up. If your body is being opened up, you are now essentially at risk of anything in the air, any bacteria, anything that's in the air that could now get into your blood and spread around your body. That's why when you cut yourself, you should put a plaster on for a while until your platelets deal with it. But basically, that's the answer to any operation question. And the other things that you could say damage the heart, you could say bleeding as well as a risk of the operation. That's 5C part 2 seems to be done. Um, Done that, done that. Question 3, booklet 3. Did I do that? Did I do that? I'm surprised nobody's asked me that yet, but I suspect somebody will. Um, Question 3 on booklet 3. Name the type of blood vessel labeled A, B, and C on the diagram. Right, it's a strange question, this, because the diagram looks hard, but actually it's not too bad. Right. Um, so let's focus on A. What's happening at A? We have arrows going towards all of these different places in your body. But where are those arrows coming from? If you just go backwards a little bit, they're coming from the heart. Okay. So this is all blood that is being going away from the heart. Any blood that's going away from the heart is traveling in an artery. So when it says name the type of blood vessel labeled A, B, and C, um, A is, oh God, wait, have I got that right? Hang on. Yeah, A, that's right. Um, has got to be um, an artery. Okay, and then let's look at C. What's happening at C? This is blood that's going away. It's going, where is it going? It's going into the heart. Veins are the blood vessel that take blood into the heart. Right, and then the last one, well, I mean, by elimination, you know the answer is capillary now, but because there's only three of them. But capillaries are, but the arrow is pointing here. Okay. And what's happening here is that this blood that is carrying oxygen, the oxygen is now moving into these cells and carbon dioxide is coming out of the cells. And that can only happen when the blood is traveling through a capillary, because capillaries have those really thin walls that allow stuff to go in and out very easily. Arteries and veins don't really allow that because the walls are much thicker. Um, So that's there. What's the job of the circulatory system? Is interesting. Anything to do with the word transport should be good because it's the blood. You're transporting substances around the body. That's what it's ultimately doing. That is not all of question 3. Two ways in which the composition of blood changes as it flows through the vessels labeled X on the diagram. Technically, I've already just answered that question because as it goes through, where's the X? Oh, there. No, I haven't. We're at the lungs. What's happening to the blood as it goes through the lungs? It, the composition of the blood, right? So as it goes through the lungs, what changes about the blood? And the answer will be that the amount of oxygen in the blood increases because we just breathed in oxygen and we put it into the blood. And then the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood decreases. What do we do with it? We put it into the lungs so that we can breathe it out. And that would be that. Right. Question 5, booklet 3. Um, hmm. Name the three types of blood vessel, A, B, and C. So the trick with this question is this thing here, which is makes it much harder, really. But these numbers are telling you by how much you have magnified this in, how much you've zoomed in. You've had to zoom in 2,000 times to see this picture as it is. And that suggests that it's a capillary, because capillaries are the ones that are the smallest. So you have to zoom in really far to be able to see them. So B is a capillary for that reason. And then this is an artery. Arteries are the ones that have the thickest walls. See that? That's all technically wall, all of this bit here. Okay. And the actual bit through which the blood is flowing is actually really small. And that's an artery. And then by definition, the last one is a vein. Veins have a much wider lumen, is the word. Um, and I was describe the job of blood vessel B. Capillary's job um, is to allow substances to pass in and out of the blood. That's why they're so thin. So substances can pass in and out of the blood easily. Um, question six. That's weird. I'm not going to answer that question. I shouldn't need to answer that question. The diagram shows a cheek cell from a human. That's an animal cell. And a leaf cell from a plant. That is a plant cell. Um, is the I am not answering any further questions, although question 5C, I'm not sure which booklet that's from, but I want the questions to come in earlier on during this session. Um, on the cheek cell, label three parts of these which both cells have, and we should know this from cells. Three things that both animal cells and plant cells have. You could say things like the nucleus. You've got to label it, don't you? On the cheek cell. So like the nucleus, you could say the cytoplasm, you could say the cell membrane. These are things that we should know. And then write the function of those three things. I'm not going to help you with that. Blood contains white cells and red cells. State the function. White blood cells are there to fight disease, which you will talk about in a topic you will do in a couple of months' time. And red blood cells carry oxygen. That's what their functions are. And then I've got to go to year 9, question 2E. Did I not do that? 2E. Oh, I knew somebody would ask that eventually. No, that's a hard, it's not that question. Right. This question requires reading, okay, which is a lot of stuff to read, but let's just read through this. It says beta blockers are a type of drug that slows the heart rate. Okay, so it slows the heart rate, and it means that what this table is showing you, that if you take these things, your heart rate seems to decrease. If you compare that 68 to 52, it decreases during both rest and exercise. Your heart does not beat as often. The stroke volume, it tells you, is how much blood is pumped out of the heart. That seems to have, well, certainly during exercise, it's decreased a lot. You have to work it out for this question, but it's decreased a lot. Cardiac output is the total volume of blood pumped out of the heart in each minute. When you take these beta blockers, you can see these numbers are much lower. So much less blood is being pumped out of the heart. And remember, why is blood being pumped out of the heart? It's to send oxygen round the body from one side of it anyway. That's what you're trying to do. So if you're taking these beta blockers, you're going to send a lot less oxygen around your body. That's what I interpret from this table. Right. Right. And then some people who take beta blockers get out of breath when they exercise. Why can that have this effect during exercise? I mean, we should really now be able to understand that. I've shown you from that table that the amount of blood leaving the heart, if you're taking these drugs, is much lower. So much less blood is pumped. I'm not going to look at the mark scheme for this, but 6 marks. Much less blood is pumped around the body. You can put some numbers to this using the table. Okay. And if less blood is pumped around the body, less oxygen reaches the cells, because that's what the blood is pumping. If less oxygen reaches your cells, what can they do less of? They do less respiration, or at least aerobic respiration. What does that mean? What does respiration do? It releases energy. So if you're doing less of this thing, you will release less energy. This is what I mean, how common this idea of less oxygen, less respiration, less energy is very common in many questions. It's almost the exact opposite of that other question that we saw earlier when you were getting more oxygen around your body. Let me just check what else we want to say for this question. Yeah, also mentioning the fact that obviously during exercise, you're trying to get more energy. But as a result of these beta blockers, you're getting less oxygen and less energy. And so what happens to your breathing rate, because you're trying to compensate for the fact that there's less oxygen getting around your body. What you're going to do now to fix that, you're going to start to breathe more heavily. So your breathing rate now increases to compensate for the lack of oxygen getting around your body. And most of those points should be sufficient for most of the marks. Put some numbers to it, and you should be good. That's 2E done, and that was it. And then I will answer that last question. So booklet 1, 5C, I think you asked. Um, which I already did answer actually on a different question, I think. Um, in fact, what I'll do now, because this is the kind of thing I wanted to talk about lastly. So you may not have done this in the lesson because it's not strictly a part of the circulatory system. It's just links to it in a different way. So let me tell you something, which I think is somewhat interesting. Um, where am I going to find it? Uh, okay. Can lots of fireworks. Um, this is the heart. As a quick reminder, when we breathe in, it goes to our lungs, the oxygen. It then goes into the heart here, and then the heart pumps it all around the body. However, the heart is a pump. A pump requires energy. In fact, your heart probably needs more energy than anything else in your body because it's probably the one organ that never stops working throughout your life, constantly. It is constantly working, it's constantly pumping. It therefore always needs energy. How do we get energy? From respiration. What does respiration require? Oxygen, preferably. That gives you more energy, aerobic respiration. But according to this diagram, the oxygen came into the heart and then it pumped it away. So how does the heart get its own oxygen that allows it to keep functioning? Well, the answer to that is technically not on this diagram. There are these little things called coronary arteries. And what they do is just as this oxygen is being pumped away from the heart, they take some of it back to the heart so that it can keep on pumping. So it basically steals some of the oxygen that is being sent around the body. Not steals, but that's its own supply of it. So that's how it works, right? So the heart is getting plenty of oxygen from these coronary arteries. Let me show you. I'm gonna have to open up a textbook really fast. Um, one moment. Mhm. Some of you guys that are in here, like year 7, year 8, you're going to be the people that are affected by the fact that the you won't have an option to do combined science. You're all going to have to do triple science. One of the changes is being announced. Um, okay, what am I looking for? There we go. If you were online at the weekend and you haven't got your homework yet, you will get it. It's just, it can't go till like Monday, Tuesday, so it takes a couple of days to get there. Um, okay, what you are about to see is, oops, another picture of the heart, basically, another picture of the heart. And oops, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, try that again. Another picture of the heart. That there is that blood vessel that I was showing you earlier, which is this one here that's sending the blood around the body. And then this thing here is the coronary artery, which is bringing some of that oxygen back to the thing. Um, yes, it's Wednesday, so if it goes on like Monday, Tuesday, then it can take a day or two to get there. So it'll probably get there tomorrow. Don't worry. It's delayed sometimes. If you have any questions on it, you can ask me on the weekend. But also, you should have today, I think, possibly received an email with the notes and the homework in it anyway. So you can always do it if you so please. Um, right. So this is the coronary artery. that's bringing oxygen and blood back to the heart. Now, let me show you what a healthy artery looks like. Okay, here we go. That's what a healthy artery looks like. Um, and as you can see, it is perfectly fine. Remember, what this is doing is it's bringing oxygen to the heart, right? It's what keeps the heart pumping, right? Because that's how it gets it. Now, if you live a certain lifestyle, and that lifestyle includes, for example, smoking or eating lots of fat, or not exercising very much, then what can happen is that various parts of your body will start having fat in those areas. Now, you've seen it with people who are obviously overweight, there you can see where that is. But also internally, lots of fat starts getting deposited in different places where you don't want it. Now, one particular place where you don't want it is here. Because bear in mind that what this blood vessel is doing is bringing oxygen to your heart to keep it pumping. But if this starts to get blocked, which is what's happening here, then suddenly the heart is going to get less oxygen. And if the heart gets less oxygen, eventually it'll struggle to pump because that's how it gets its energy, right? Energy comes from that oxygen. And so if this starts to happen quite badly for some people, then they can have a heart attack, firstly. And then they have to have some sort of operation. And what that operation involves is what I'm about to show you. So bear in mind, this is getting blocked. It's like imagine a road and there's lots of stuff in it. You need to clear it so that the stuff can pass through. The traffic can flow. In this case, so the blood can flow. So what do we do? So if you have a heart attack, you go to hospital, what does the doctor do? It's very hard for them to go into here and remove the fat because it's like, well, it's too intricate. So what they do, I will get to this very quickly. They use something called a stent. A stent looks basically like, oh, why is that not showing? Yeah, like this. It's like a little cylinder made of metal wire. What they do with that cylinder, just to very summarize this very quickly, is they put a tube inside it and they put a balloon inside it. When they put that balloon inside it, they then put this tube through your leg up to where that blockage is. And then I'll show you a video as to what happens next. So this is that coronary artery. This is bringing, let me bring it back a bit. This is bringing oxygen to your heart. But as you can see, as a result of you eating lots of butter, it has started to get blocked. And now that gap is so small, the heart is going to get very little oxygen. It's going to get very little. It's going to come really trickle through it slowly to the point where it's like worthless. So what we have to do is try and fix this. What we do is we get one of those stents. It's like a little metal cylinder. We put a balloon inside it and then on a tube, and we put that tube through your leg with a camera up to this position. There it is. And then what we do, which is clever, is we inflate the balloon. We send some air in so the balloon gets bigger. Like that. And look what it's done. It's pushed all of that fat to the sides and opened up that pathway again. And then all we do is we deflate the balloon and take it out. And that wire cylinder, the stent, that's what that's called, stays there, which is fine because it's just opened everything back up again. It's like if we use the road example, we had loads of stuff in the middle of the road, and all we did was we moved it to the side onto the pavement. So it cleared the road. The stuff's still there, but at least we have cleared the path, and now your blood and your oxygen can flow through. That is what a stent is. And so finally, to answer the last question. Bum, bum. Here it is. There's that picture we showed you. How does the stent help to prevent another heart attack? It helps prevent another heart attack because it allows the blood to flow through, whereas before we had a blockage. So it's removed the blockage and has allowed the blood to flow through. You can't see the picture here, but risks of an operation, as I said, are always the same. Infection and bleeding is what I would say in response to that. So yes, hopefully you learned something new if you did not do the bit about stents in the lesson, but that is what it is. It is linked to the heart, obviously, because it's the thing that helps to open up the blood vessel that's bringing oxygen to the heart. Right, it is now 5 to 8. What I will do is stop this session now. For those of you in year 10 and 11, um, we will go through that, and I will explain how it's going to be a little bit more complicated. This, as we go forward, by the way, just so you know, it's going to be a tiny bit complicated this month because people on a Friday, in fact, this doesn't affect you guys. It'll be year 10 and year 11. I'll talk about that in 5 minutes. Right, enjoy. I'll be back. Hello. Right, just for those of you in year 10 and year 11, it's going to be a little bit complicated this month, these sessions, because of the order of our lessons. So, for example, today, some of you who attend on a Friday will have done, or Thursday, or Friday, or Wednesday, will have done some maths in your last lesson, and I have that ready. And then the rest of you will have done some biology, and that'll happen each week this month, where people attending on a Friday or a Thursday will do something different to the people at the weekend, which means I have to have four things ready to go, as it were. Um, so if you have any questions, please just specify the subject as well, whether it's maths or biology, um, and what year, and then I will have the relevant homework ready. And if nobody has any questions, then I will do a little bit of revision of a few different things. Um, QD, I don't know what that means. Um, yeah, that's not a number. Do you want to try that again? I can do it. Question D. Again, is there a number to go with that? 1D? Are you on 1D? I presume it's 1D. It's the biggest one. But on the assumption that it is, let's talk about this question because it's a very common um, question that you have to answer, which is comparing arteries and veins or arteries and veins and capillaries and stuff like that. So I'll begin talking about that. So explain how the different structure of arteries and veins relates to their different functions. That's important. So it's not just about saying, oh, this is like this and this is like that. How does that link to what it has to do? So the way I would go about this is firstly state the obvious, which is that remember, A for arteries carry blood away from the heart, in for veins carry blood in to the heart. So arteries carry blood away from the heart. And crucially, this is the bit that's important. When blood is being pumped away from the heart, it is traveling at a very high pressure. It's a bit like, as I explained to the ones I taught, that if you turn a tap on and you put your hand near the top of the tap, just as it's coming out, you will feel more of a force there than you will near the bottom if you put your hand just as it touches the sink. Um, And that's because at the moment at which the water is released or pumped, it is going to be traveling at a higher pressure and harder. And later on, it will have lost some of that. And so it won't be as hard. So because arteries are carrying blood away from the heart, just as it has pumped, then it will be traveling at a very high pressure. High pressure means that there is a chance, I suppose, that the blood vessel, the pipe that's carrying the blood, could burst or break. And so arteries need to make sure they don't do that. And so they have very thick elastic walls to withstand or deal with that high pressure. In order to not break, they're a little bit stretchy and a little bit thick, a bit like a hose pipe, because a hose pipe is also carrying water at a very high pressure, and it is made of a very particular material. It's like rubber, it's thick, it's stretchy, so to make sure that the water doesn't sort of break out of it. And so arteries have to do the same thing. They have to withstand that high pressure. And so having the thick elastic walls allows them to do that, um, which can stretch and, yeah, be protected. Okay, so that's sort of how you would be able to deal with that first bit. Veins, on the other hand, because they're carrying blood back to the heart at the end of that journey, or the bottom of the tap, if you want to think of it that way, they're carrying blood at a much lower pressure. And one of the problems with a low pressure means less force, right? And so there is a chance if the blood is sort of flowing quite slowly, that it could actually flow backwards. Imagine it going up your leg. Okay. So this blood has gone down to your leg and now is coming back to your heart that way. Imagine it trickling upwards slowly. Well, what's to stop it from going backwards? Well, there is something to stop it from going backwards because we don't want it to go backwards because that causes a problem. We want everything to keep going in the same direction. And so what veins have is valves. And what valves do, I think of them as like gates. That once you go through them, they close behind you and you can't, and they lock, so you can't go backwards. You have to keep going forwards. So veins have valves which prevent the backflow of blood. And that should be sufficient for all of the marks on that particular question. Right, we don't have any more questions. How exciting. Um, are there any more? Again, just to be clear, if you attend on a Thursday or a Friday, you will have done some maths in the last lesson, and you will do this stuff later. But if you have any questions on that stuff, then just say maths and so on. 3C seems to have come up a couple of times. Okay. This was in the last session as well. So, on this question, the question is explain or describe how the composition of the blood changes here. Composition means basically what's in the blood. How does what's in the blood change as it flows from here through the lungs? Right. So, first of all, let me just go through the whole process. This is a good summary here. We breathe in oxygen. Okay. The oxygen goes into our lungs and then into our blood. This blood flows to the heart. This is oxygenated blood because it's carrying oxygen. The heart then pumps it all around the body to your head, to your, whatever this is, liver, to your gut, to the rest of the body, basically everywhere, right? All of that oxygen has to get all around your body because all of your cells need energy. How do they get energy? From respiration. Respiration requires this oxygen. So we're trying to get this oxygen to all of the mitochondria in all of your cells. And that's how we do it. The heart sends it there. Right. When respiration takes place, respiration is, to put it very simply, glucose plus oxygen makes carbon dioxide and water. That is not the simple equation. Um, but whenever we do this thing called respiration, we produce a waste product in all our cells called carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide has to be removed from the body. And so, from all of these cells, when this oxygen reaches it, carbon dioxide is put into the blood to be carried backwards. Okay, so all of these places, carbon dioxide goes back. So this blood now goes back to the heart from all of these places, now carrying carbon dioxide. We call it deoxygenated blood now. That then goes into the other side of the heart and then gets sent to your lungs where you breathe it out. Okay, it's a lovely picture because it covers everything. So if this blood, we look here, what has happened to the blood as it's flown through the lungs? Flown? Is that the word? Flown? Yeah. Um, the amount of carbon dioxide will have decreased in the blood because we breathe it out and get rid of it. And the amount of oxygen increases because we take it in and put it into the blood. And that is how you answer question 3C. Two ways in which the composition of the blood changes. As it flows through those vessels, the amount of carbon dioxide decreases because it goes into the lungs. We breathe it out. And the amount of oxygen in the blood increases because we've just breathed in and brought it back in. Last two questions in the attempt, both labeled as number two. Sure. I don't think I've seen these questions. This will be interesting. Um, Right, these questions both labeled as number two. Okay, let's talk about it. Um, so the graph shows the heart rate of a fit person and of an unfit person. So more. The amount of deoxygenated blood is decreased. 3C. No, you can't. You have to be specific about the gases. Because the amount of oh yeah, I see what you mean. The amount of deoxygenated blood is decreased. Yeah, it's a bit too messy to say it like that. I think you need to say the amount of carbon dioxide has decreased, and then the amount of oxygen has increased. I can see what you mean. Yeah, technically the amount of deoxygenated blood has decreased, but the mark scheme wants you to talk about the actual gases involved. The heart rate of a fit person and of an unfit person at rest during exercise and after exercise. Look, I will tell you one thing is that I have never seen this question before. So I'm going to look at it as I think you should look at these questions. Because these extra questions at the back of these booklets have been added very recently. Um, I spend a little, when I look at these questions, I spend a bit of time understanding the graph, and I really recommend you do that. Don't just skip over it and dive to the question. Just look at it, make sure you understand what's happening here. So we have a line showing the heart rate of the unfit person here and the fit person, both, oh, not both, but all three of at rest during exercise and after exercise. Okay, so let's see what's happened here. The unfit person, what do I notice about this person's heart rate? Well, I notice that at the beginning, even when we're at rest, before we do any exercise, the unfit person has got a much higher heart rate than the unfit person. That's called the resting heart rate. So the heart rate at the beginning, at rest, is much higher for the unfit person. You can put some numbers on it. It's 78 or whatever it is. Um, whereas the fit person's is 56. Okay. So you can say that, right? So we can see that that's different. Right. Then what happens when they start exercising? When they start exercising, the heart rate of the unfit person gets as high as 140, whereas the heart rate of the fit person doesn't get as high. It increases, clearly, but it doesn't get anywhere near as high as the unfit person. And then also one thing I notice is that after exercise, see this line here? Let me do that again. Look how steep this line is compared to this line. Okay. That is a much steeper line. What does that tell me? It tells me that after exercise, the fitter person's heart rate returns to normal really quickly. That steepness of a line on a graph represents speed effectively. So it is dropped back down to normal much more quickly than the unfit person's heart rate has dropped back down to their normal. Okay, again, the normal is still higher, but the speed at which it's dropped is much faster for the fit person. And we also know this from real life. You kind of know that if you're not very fit, right, you kind of keep breathing heavily for ages. It's called anaerobic respiration. You keep breathing for ages after you've exercised, whereas a fitter person kind of gets back to normal quickly, okay? And I suspect everything I've just said is the answer to the first question. Compare the heart rate of the fit person with the heart rate of the unfit person from 5 to 15 minutes. Be careful. So the first bit I said is not relevant. We've got to start at 5 minutes. So you could say that the unfit person's heart rate is much higher during exercise. Okay, it reaches a much higher point. Um, and you could then say that the heart rate comes back to normal much more quickly for the fit person. That's what I would probably say. You could also mention that the heart rate actually increases more quickly as well. This one's not as obvious. Hard to see this one actually. So this line here is steeper than this line here, even though it looks pretty similar to me. It's very slight. The red line's very slightly steeper. That tells me that your heart rate increases much more quickly when you're unfit as well. And there you go. So there's your basically a 3 points. So you can say the unfit person obviously clearly has a much higher heart rate um, during exercise and also at the end, I suppose you can say when it drops back down to normal. And you could also, the critical thing that's harder is the speed bit, that when you're fit, your heart rate drops back to normal way more quickly than it does for the unfit person. 2B, I'll come to that in the 10 one. Yeah, I presume that's the early 2B one. And then calculate cardiac output at 10 minutes. So it tells you cardiac output is stroke volume times heartbeat. The stroke volume is 0.2. And then we need the heart rate at 10 minutes. So what you would do is go to the fit person at 10 minutes. Fit person at 10 minutes, their heart rate is 110. I'm going to say 110. Yeah. Um, and so you just put 110 there and times those two numbers together, and that should be good. Um, the recovery period is the time it takes for the heart rate to return to its rate at rest after exercise. Why was the recovery period for the fit person different than for the unfit person? So why did it drop back down to normal so much more quickly when you're fit? Well, it's explained, firstly, explained that the obviously fit person has a much faster recovery time. That's an easy mark. Just explain that they recover much more quickly, get back to normal quickly. Um, and it's usually because there's a bit of a harder one. In the sense that actually no, there's an easy answer to this, which is if you are less fit, you are more likely to do anaerobic respiration. And that means that you have this oxygen debt. Remember that oxygen debt in that? So it means that you're continuing to breathe really heavily afterwards, so you don't recover as quickly. If you're fit, you are less likely to do anaerobic respiration. So if you're less likely to do anaerobic respiration, you don't have an oxygen debt. And if you don't have an oxygen debt, you don't need to keep breathing for ages afterwards. You're kind of back to normal much more quickly. Okay, that should be that. Which of the following is the direction of blood flows through and from the heart? Okay, this I sort of explained it. Let me just do this very quickly again. This what I'm about to do. If you want to know, if you know this topic really well, the whole about the heart and the lungs bit, then you can do what I'm about to do yourself. Lungs, heart, all over the body. You breathe in oxygen to your lungs. The lungs, the blood from the lungs takes the oxygen and brings it to the heart. It brings it through something called the pulmonary vein. Okay. And it goes into your left atrium and then your left ventricle. It's then pumped out of there through something called the aorta. And it goes all around the body and then it comes back through something called the vena cava into the right atrium, then the right ventricle, and then it's sent back to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. If you can do exactly what I just did there, you basically know this thing really well. And I think that should answer all of the questions, hopefully. God. Pulmonary vein, atrium, ventricle, aorta. That should be the answer. Make sure it is. Yes, it is. Um, there's another 2B. I know. Don't worry. We'll go back to the top in a second. More carbon dioxide produced by cells during exercise. Name the part of the blood that transfers most of the carbon dioxide to the lung. Should be plasma, I want to say. It is plasma. Plasma carries carbon dioxide. Red blood cells carry oxygen. Um, right. This is a long question, but I'm not going to answer it fully because you need to, I'll just speak about it. How does the rate of blood flow change during exercise? Explain. So, what I would do is explain that during exercise, less blood flows to, for example, the digestive system and the kidneys, and more flows to the muscles. You see that now? That number is so much bigger. A bit more to the brain, a lot more to your skin, quite a lot to your heart muscle, and that's it, right? So why does that happen? Why is it that when you're exercising, these parts of your body, like your digestive system and your kidneys, get less blood, whereas other parts, like your muscles, your brain, your skin, get more? Well, quite a lot of detail here. Firstly, when you're exercising, your muscles especially need more oxygen. Why do they need more oxygen? So that they can do more respiration, release more energy. We've seen this already several times today. More oxygen, more respiration, more energy. These things go together really well, and your muscles need it because you're running around or whatever you're doing. Um, and so that's why the blood flow going to these places increases by so much because you're just trying to deliver more oxygen to them. So that's one explanation for the muscles. And so it has to decrease from other places. Your digestive system and your kidneys don't need as much blood or oxygen right now while you're exercising. If you were eating food, it might be different, but right now you don't. So you're exercising. So you're trying to basically divert blood from places that don't need as much of it to places that do need more of it. So your muscles need more to be able to release energy from respiration. The brain, I don't know why it gets a bit more, but I'll see what the mark scheme says. But the skin I can explain. Why does the skin suddenly get way more blood when you're exercising? Because during respiration, you get warmer. You're releasing more heat energy as well. Um, and when you get warmer, you want to try and prevent your body from getting too hot. And so blood flows closer to your skin. That's why you look a bit red sometimes when you're hot or exercising, because what you're trying to do is lose heat through your skin. It's a process called vasodilation, where your blood flows closer to your skin to release heat. That's how I would explain this question. Let me see what the mark scheme tells me. See how much of that was correct. Blood flow skin. Oh, yeah, put some numbers to it as well, by the way. Easy marks with these kind of questions, explaining that it's increased by nearly like 6 times more and so on, that kind of thing. It's easy marks for that. And then, yeah, essentially explaining that some organs need more blood so that they can do what they do. Okay, so that's essentially that. The key thing here is to put some numbers to this um, and explain that, because really the question is explain how it changes during exercise. So you need to explain that it decreases from certain places and it increases to the other places and actually put some numbers to it. Um, so explain that blood is diverted, it's a good word, away from certain places to places like your muscles or your skin um, that need more of it during that time. And all, yeah, and then literally the total blood flow around the body has just increased. Well, the numbers are just way bigger. Okay. And right, there's a different two. Is that all of two? Um, the rate of blood flow to the lungs is always the same as the total rate of blood flow shown in the table. Um, well, I think it's because all of the blood goes through the lungs, because that's where it gets the oxygen. Yeah, so basically the amount of blood going through the lungs never changes because it's all of your blood has to go through your lungs to get oxygen, essentially. So all of your blood goes through the lungs is essentially the answer to that. Right, let me go backwards to 2B earlier. We need to change the numbering on these booklets. We've not done that yet. Um, there, yeah, I'll just tell you this. I wouldn't have mentioned it. Um, it's just an answer that you no, I believe the answer is the right atrium. The right atrium is where there are these little cells called a pacemaker. Let me just make sure that is correct. I'm pretty sure it's the right atrium. It is the right atrium. Yeah. Um, so do I write the blood flow increase reason for all the parts of the body? So that big question that I just went through. Yeah, you want to explain that it put some numbers to it. Just say that the amount of blood going to, for example, the digestive system, like more than halves. It's more than, it halves, doesn't it, basically? The kidneys, it pretty much halves as well. And then to the muscles, it has increased by like 12 times, it's like 12 times bigger. To the skin, it's increased by like 6 times. Put some actual numbers to how many times it's increased, and then put a little bit of an explanation as to why. It's because these parts of the body, your muscles and your skin, need more oxygen, and so the blood is diverted away from some places to these other places like your muscles and your skin that need more oxygen at the time. So that's how I would go about doing that. Someone said 4A, year 10. I expect you're doing it live again. Um, come on. Right. This is the easiest thing in the world if you remember this, which is that why your kidneys sometimes hurt when doing a lot of exercise? Do your kidneys hurt? How do you know your kidneys are hurting when you're doing a lot of exercise? I'm not sure how I would sorry, I just missed a question here. Could you also do part B of the last question? Let me just check what that was. I'll do answer this question, but yes. I don't know why your kidneys sometimes hurt when you, again, I don't know how you know that your kidneys hurt when you're doing a lot of exercise. Give the letter of one blood vessel as an artery. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. So anything, any arrow here that's going away from the heart, such as that one or this one, is an answer to that question. So that automatically puts you on B or D. Um, and the last part B of the last question. I don't do that. I think I did. Oh, I didn't. Part B of the last question about this one here. Um, Joe runs a 100 meters race at school. At the end of the race, she sits down, but is still breathing much more quickly than she normally does. Why did she? I think that's anaerobic respiration, is the detail about this. So you need to explain that she was respiring anaerobically. She built up some lactic acid and had an oxygen debt, and then she continues to breathe in order to remove the lactic acid. Joe's friend Sam does not do that. Oh God, the hole in his heart. Some blood moves straight from the right side of his heart to the left. Oh God. Why a hole in the heart would make it difficult for Sam to run in the race. Before I look at the mark scheme, my answer to this question probably is that if blood is moving from one side of your heart to the other, it means that you will not be getting as much, oh God, it's right to left. You probably aren't getting as much oxygen around your body as quickly, and therefore less respiration, less energy, and that makes it harder to run around and so on. Okay, so let me check that last one. Some blood bypasses the lungs. Yeah, the point about this is that less oxygen gets to the blood, right? Because some of the blood that should be going, let me just explain this again. Right, so this is the right side, this is the left one, it's the opposite way around as you look at it. This blood here should be going to your lungs to collect oxygen, right? And then that oxygen is sent all over the body eventually. But if some of this blood, because of a hole in the heart, is kind of drifting over to here, that means less blood is getting to your lungs. That means you're going to get less oxygen because there's not as much blood going there. Less oxygen means that you'll get less oxygen to your muscles, less respiration, less energy, harder to run. That's essentially the answer. So less oxygen will be getting around your body, partly because less blood is going to be going to your lungs because of this hole in the heart that's sending blood not to your lungs, essentially. That's the principle of it. Um, um, any specific questions on genetics? Mhm. Is that from the homework that you're asking me about? I mean, I have the genetics. Oh, somewhere here. Which is what year 11 did this week, but I need specifics. Any other questions from any of the other booklets? At which point I might just do a little bit of genetics revision. Did anybody want it? Nobody's here from the maths. Mhm. Um, right. Nope, not doing that. Sorry, not doing that question. You're asking me that question out of laziness, not for any other reason. Um, you should know why given what I've said so far today, you should be able to explain why during exercise your heart rate increases. I'll give you a clue. If your heart rate is increasing, more oxygen is being sent well, more blood is going around your body more quickly, so more oxygen is going around your body more quickly. And that should be the beginning of how you answer the rest of that question. Um, 1C, have a look at 1C. Well, actually, that's the same question as the previous one. So, why do you think your muscles need more blood during exercise? Again, I'm not going to answer it fully, but of course, the clue has got to be during exercise, your muscles need more energy. How do they get energy? Through respiration. What does respiration require? Oxygen. How does oxygen get around your body? In the blood. So why would the blood flow to the muscles increase during exercise? Surely it's so that more oxygen can be sent to your muscles in order for them to do more respiration, in order for those cells to release more energy to allow you to do this exercise. Okay. So just something I was talking about last time, actually, in the last hour. A very common part of this topic, this whole area of respiration, energy, exercise stuff, right, is just understanding that if for any reason you need more energy, okay, for any reason you need more energy, and that is usually exercise related. That's the obvious thing, exercise, right? But it doesn't have to be exercise. If you want to link it to something slightly more complicated, if you remember in cells, you learnt about active transport. Active transport was a process of moving particles from a low to a high concentration using energy. So that process requires energy. It's easier to understand exercise in your head because, it's more familiar. But there are other processes in your body that require energy. So anywhere that more energy is required, we would need to do more respiration because that is how we get energy. Anywhere that more respiration is required, you would need more oxygen. Okay? More oxygen, more respiration, more energy. Okay? This flow of processes applies to quite a lot of different questions um, in biology because I could phrase so many different questions around this, whether it's exercise, whether it's active transport, there's various other things as well. But this principle of more oxygen, more respiration, more energy is really important. And again, you can also link mitochondria to this because that is where the respiration takes place in a cell. So just understanding these words or this flow of information is important because it's usually worth, in fact, literally in that question that we just saw, it's often worth three separate marks. So having this clear in your mind avoids you losing any of those three marks. And one more thing that I will just mention on relation to that is another question that I could link to this explanation is why, for example, smoking affects your ability to exercise. Well, if you smoke, one of the things that happens is that your lungs get a bit damaged, and that means that less oxygen goes around your body. If less oxygen goes to your cells, they'll be able to do less respiration. If you do less respiration, you release less energy, and therefore you'll find it difficult to exercise as much. And that hole in the heart thing was essentially the same principle. Why having a hole in the heart? Well, having that hole in the heart meant less oxygen was going around your body, less respiration, less energy. Do you see how so many questions can relate to this principle of understanding oxygen, respiration, energy? Like you could phrase them. So that hole in the heart I'd never seen before, a question like that. But the answer was basically the same. Question 4B, here 10 has been mentioned. No, not that one. Yeah, again, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing question 4B because I've just been explaining how to do question 4B. Um, um, 4A was done, 4B. Right. It doesn't seem like anybody from any of the year 11 students seem to be asking any questions. It's slightly concerning. Um, I've already done 3C. You'll have to watch the video back, unfortunately. Um, is this in the genetics? Now, I'll move on to the other one now. Yeah, so I presume that's for genetic. When you said question 3B, I presume you mean, is this one? Are you talking about this one? Um, are you talking of 6B from genetics or from year 11 6B? Fine. Yeah, I'm moving on from the year 10 booklet now. I think that's enough of that. So how would you word 6B on here? This one, 6B. Oh, right. Explain the reason for your answer. Oh, the couple has one girl. What is the chance of the new baby will be another girl? Well, firstly, the answer is always 50%. Okay. And explain the reason for your answer. I think it's almost impossible to do it without a genetic diagram, I think. So I would do it like this, a genetic diagram like so, to say, there's your male chromosomes. These are your female chromosomes. Um, Not chromosomes, alleles. Well, chromosomes, yeah. Um, if anybody has any maths questions, please feel free to ask. When you say, are you going to be doing any maths? The So remember that the whole idea of this is that males have sperm cells. Each sperm cell either carries this or this because during meiosis the XY is split. Similarly, female egg cells have X's because they only have XX. And so if these two join together, then you are a female. If the X and the Y join together, you're a male. If the other XY join together, you're a male. If these join together, you're a female. And so that shows that it's a 50-50 probability. I don't know how you would easily do that. Let me see if there's any words in the mark scheme. But I would normally struggle to put that into words. 50%. Yeah, it just says if you, oh, the written explanation could be, let's read what mark scheme says. Half the sperm have the X chromosome, half of them have the Y. All of the eggs have the X chromosome. And so it's a 50% chance. I think it's harder to word that than just to stick it into that diagram, I think. So that's probably what I would say in answer to that question. Okay. Um, yeah, if the person who says, are you going to be doing any maths again, anonymous attendee, if you'd like me to, if you have any math questions, then ask me. According to the mark scheme, as long as you get all of, yes, if you do just the diagram, you will get all of the marks. So the mark scheme I'm looking at says that as long as you've got the gametes all correct, and by that we mean these things inside the boxes, um, and the genotypes of offspring all correct. So as long as you get these correct and everything in the diagram correct, you get all the marks. Yes. Yes, that would be fine. And obviously the 50% would be the third mark. 3G, of course. I might just let me just go through question three because I hate it when these questions right at the end to understand the whole thing. First of all, which is a DNA molecule? It's that double helix structure. So that one describe the structure. In fact, literally, if you say double helix now, that would be a mark. A gene is a small section of DNA on a chromosome. A gene codes for a particular sequence of amino acids that make a specific protein. What is meant by the term genome? It is all of the genetic material in an organism. The complete human genome is now known. Give it which important scientific advance was made. I think it helped us sort of trace backwards where people came from. So it is that one. Right, a student found 6 different snails of one species in his garden. This shows the snails. Okay, all of them are different. Not looking, do they? Which scientific terms have differences in characteristics? That's called variation. What should be? Variation is the fact that we're not all exactly the same. A change in DNA has caused snail P to be very different. It's got a big shell. Um, Suggest why there might be an increasing number of snails similar to snail P in each future generation. Um, oh, can 3F be phenotypes? No, because that's not the scientific term that describes differences in characteristics between individuals. The phenotype is the description of your combination of alleles. Like if you've got FF, then it means you've got cystic fibrosis or whatever it might be. So it is only variation for that one. Um, can you learn how to factorize fully with squared numbers? Have you got a specific example of a question when you say factorize fully with squared numbers? If you write an example of a question, I will explain because it's a bit vague, that question. Sorry, yes, I need to answer this question now, don't I? Well, yeah, P breeds the most, or it might have a dominant gene. It's not so much the dominant gene. This is next time we do genetics, because with genetics is we've split it into two sections. And there's the stuff that you did at the weekend, which is to do with the technical stuff, I suppose. And then there's quite a lot more to it to do with evolution and so on. This is more of an evolutionary sort of question. Um, and there's two answers here. And I think it's quite hard to answer this question. So the idea of it is that P clearly has a much bigger, larger shell. Okay. That larger shell, I don't know how you would know this, but it supposedly gives it more chance to survive. Presumably because the shell provides some sort of protection. If it's a bigger shell, it's got more protection. If it's got more protection, it's more likely to survive. That's the crucial bit of this idea. Um, when you have any sort of characteristic being passed on to the future, it is because that characteristic makes it more likely for you to survive. Giraffes having long necks, that characteristic was passed on because it gives them more chance of surviving. They can reach food that's higher up. Polar bears having white fur, it gives them more chance of surviving because it camouflages them and so on, right? In this case, the larger shell makes them more likely to survive. And then if they're more likely to survive, they're more likely to reproduce and pass on the gene that gave them the large shell. So it's quite a weird application question. But the idea of this whole evolution thing, which you will do next time you do biology with us, is this idea that everything that's around us at the moment, including you and I to an extent, we have some advantage that has allowed us to keep on to not die, essentially, whatever that might be. Any advantage that a species has that prevents it from dying is what gets is the reason that it has that characteristic. Because what's happened is it's not died, it has then reproduced, it has passed on that thing, whatever it was, to the next generation. In this case, it's the large shell. In the case of a giraffe, it's a long neck. In the case of a polar bear, it's the white fur. In the case of, I don't know, rabbits with big ears, it's big ears that allowed it to hear danger coming and allowed it to run away. So it was more likely to survive. Again, whatever that feature is what allows it to survive. Okay, right. Presumably that answers those questions. Somebody asked me 4x squared minus 16, so I'm just going to just do that just because I can very quickly. Um, this is what you don't get anywhere else, is it? All right, 4x squared minus 16. Factorize this. Anybody know what that factorizes to? You want to have a go? I'll give you a clue. It becomes two brackets. Um, Let me go off topic before I explain that. If I said to you, expand the following brackets, okay, the way you would expand them is you would do this times this, which is x squared, this times this, which is minus 3x, this times this, which is plus 3x, and this times this, which is minus 9. And then what happens in this very specific situation is this bit in the middle, because it's minus 3x plus 3x, cancels out. Then you're left with this. And now sometimes when you look at this, it is not obvious that it goes back to this, right? Because it's just, you've kind of lost that bit in the middle and it's not immediately obvious in your brain that this can factorize into two brackets. Normally, when you factorize, you look for common letters. Like, you see what I mean? If I said to you 2a plus ab, then you take a out and it's 2a, 2 plus b, and so on. You look for common things and you can't see any. So therefore, it looks like it doesn't necessarily factorize. But you have to remember that if you have a square number here, and a square number is literally something squared, and a square number here, in this case 3 squared, and a minus in the middle, then this can refactorize, go back into brackets, like this, where it's this plus this, and then that minus that as well. And what you have to recognize in a question, and it's hard to spot this, which is why it's a good question, actually. In this case, it's actually the same situation because 4x squared is 2x squared because you square the 2 to 4 and the x becomes squared. 16 is 4 squared, and there is a minus in the middle. It's called the difference of two squares, the difference of two square numbers. 2x squared and 4 squared, difference of two square numbers with a minus in between. And the way it factorizes is this plus this, and then that minus that as well. So that's a very, what's the word? Specific factorizing thing called the difference of two squares. Okay, I'll just do one more example of that. If I gave you, 25x squared minus 36y squared, and I said factorize it. Again, you might look at it and think, well, I don't know how to factorize that because there's no, letters that are common in both of them. There's also no factor actually that goes into both 25 and 36. However, you're meant to recognize that this is 5x squared. 25x squared. And this is 6y squared, 36y squared. And there's a minus in the middle. Therefore, the factorization of this is 5x plus 6y, 5x minus 6y. Essentially, if you expanded this out, you would get 25x squared minus 30xy plus 30xy minus 36y squared. And this bit in the middle, because it's minus and a plus, vanishes, leaving you with 25x squared minus 36y squared. You see what I mean? So that's a good example of that. Anything else? Anybody want anything else? Um, I will do one last thing. Oh, actually, should I do that? I don't know if any of you guys have been watching some of the videos I've been making recently. Um, but I will recreate one of them. So one of the things I've been doing recently was doing videos in which I deliberately made a mistake. Um, and see if you can see it. So I'm just going to do one of those questions now. Expand and simplify. So what I'm about to do, just to finish off, is I'm going to do a question, and I'm going to do something wrong. And you have to tell me what I do wrong. The question is, I'm going to expand the following. Okay, I'm going to do this pretty quickly because it's much better if I do it quickly. I'm going to expand and simplify, but I'm going to make a mistake somewhere along the way. It is your job to see if you can tell me what mistake I make when I expand and simplify this question. So 6y plus 3, 6 times y is 6y, 6 times 3 is 18, minus 5 times y is 5y, 5 times minus 4 is minus 20, 6y minus 5y is 1y, 18 take away 20 is minus 2. That is expanded and simplified. Anybody know what mistake I made? Minus 5 times minus 4 is not minus 20. Excellent. I deliberately spaced this out a little bit. However, this number is a minus 5. Minus 5 times y is minus 5y, but minus 5 times minus 4 is plus 20. 18 plus 20 is 38, and that is the answer to that question. Um, okay, I might just do one last one of those. Usually quite entertaining. What else did I do? No, I can't think of anything else. In fact, yeah, this is might be a bit heavy because, but we'll see how good your trigonometry is if anybody knows. Um, so I might do this more often. I think it's quite good with maths here for you to spot mistakes. Right, I'm going to answer this question. The question is to work out what x is. Um, I'm going to label my three sides opposite, hypotenuse, adjacent. I'm going to use SOHCAHTOA. Okay, using SOHCAHTOA, I will create this equation. Sine 42 equals 8 divided by x, and then x is going to be 8 divided by sine 42, which is, oops, 11.9, call it 12. And I have got the answer. God, someone already seen it. Let me know what I did wrong there. How do you factorize fractions? Again, I need specifics. I need specific questions if you're going to ask me how do you factorize fractions. It really depends on the question a little bit. But in simple answer is in no differently to normal factorizing. What's the simple answer? Let me know what I did wrong in that question before I finish. It should be x divided by 8. Also, just to be clear, if you do make this mistake in a question such as this one, you should know immediately that you have made this mistake because you are telling me that this side is 12. And it can't be because 8 is the hypotenuse. It is the longest side of the triangle. The other two sides cannot be longer than 8. So therefore, clearly I have made a mistake somewhere. So if you do make a mistake on this particular very specific topic, um, sometimes it is possible to tell that you have made this mistake. So SOH, SOH, tells you that its sine something equals O divided by H in that order. My O was X. My H was 8, so it should have been 8 times sine 42, not 8 divided by, which is 5.4. Okay, last one. It's because, what else did I do? That's too easy for you guys. Okay, I will just do it. I mean, this is too easy. I promise you, this is too easy. But I'll do that question that has just been asked in a moment. If possible, I don't know who this is. Could you tell me who that is that's asking these questions about the maths? Right, I'm going to solve this equation. Solve. Ready? This is going to be ridiculous. What I'm about to do. Okay. When you're solving these equations, you need to get the x's together on one side. So I'm going to move this over to get 11x, take away 6x, which is 5x, equal, take away 3 equals 1. I'm then going to add the 3 to get 4 there. And then I'm going to, because it's 5 times x, I'm going to multiply 4 by 5 to get 20 is my answer. 20 is the answer to the question. What have I done wrong? What's the question on magnetism? I'll see if I have time. Anyway, the answer to what I did wrong here was from here, you, of course, should have divided by 5, not times by 5. Um, I don't know who that is. Whoever's asked that math question, x squared minus 9, unless you tell me who you are, I'm not going to answer the question. Um, Genetics B, no. Just because of the way our structure works, we will do it at the beginning of next month because we're doing chemistry next week, and then physics, and then maths. Yeah, it's a weird way to do it, but we have to rotate through all the subjects to get through everything by the end of the year. So we will do that. Right. Look. Right, just to be clear, if you do want to go at this point, you would go. I'm just going through one last question that has just been sent. Um, oh, God, what's happening here? Um, okay, that. Oh, I'm sure. Will we take the kidney someday? Yes, we will. It will. We might not have got round to it when we did that, but if you contact us, and I actually made a video on this stuff before, um, the kidney stuff will probably revisit when we get closer to the exams and stuff. But yes, is the answer. I mean, we have everything on it. It's just depending on when we get around to. We might end up doing it more when we start doing the exam revision stuff later. It is quite a complicated area, but sometimes homeostasis is so big that it's hard to get through everything. Um, but yes, we should be doing that. This question that I know I appreciate nobody can see this, so I'm just literally talking to one person here who sent me this question. That's why I said the rest of you are welcome to go. Um, I think it's slightly tricky without seeing part A of this question, but the question says here, calculate magnetic flux density. This is the formula that involves magnetic flux density. The question tells you the length of the wire. So it tells you it's 6 centimeters. I don't think it's relevant. I don't think it's relevant that it's placed 3 centimeters from the support and the wire is placed 8 centimeters. I don't know if that's relevant. I don't think it is, but so I'm just telling you what I think at the moment. Um, this is the formula that involves magnetic flux density. The question mentions current 0.2 amps. It mentions the length of the wire, which is 6 centimeters, so 0.06 meters is what I've changed that to. We're trying to work out this, and we don't have the force, so we need that to be able to work out the B, which is the magnetic flux density. Now, the question also mentions acceleration and a mass. Now, I know this formula links force, mass, and acceleration. So, based on this, the mass of is 0.08. The acceleration they tell you is 10, which means the F is 0.8. Again, I might be wrong here, but I'm just instinctively telling you. If that 0.8 comes into here, then we should be able to work out what the B is, assuming I've done that bit correctly. Assuming I've done that correctly, then this next bit is easy. But 0.2 times 0.06 is 0.012. And if you divide that over, you get that, which feels wrong. But if you send us part A as well, then I might be able to help you with that. But that is it for now. The answer 25. Okay, fine. Well, then I've done something wrong. It's something to do with the length of those wires. It might be helpful if you could send us part A as well, so that I can at least see how the question begins. Um, the request for the GCSE chemistry booklet on bonding and atomic structure, yes, is the answer. But what you need to do is if you could send us a message on the WhatsApp or email us, because I'm not going to remember what you just said to me. So yes, generally it is possible. Right. So I can't do any more at the moment because I've got somewhere to be. But I will have a look at the part A of that question. I will see if I can figure out what on earth is going on um, later on. That's okay. Right. Right. That's it. Hopefully that was useful. I'll see you later.